Welcome and good morning. Before I begin, I would like to note that members of the full committee plan on attending today who may not be part of this committee. And so therefore I ask unanimous consent that these committee members be permitted to participate in this hearing with the understanding that all sitting subcommittee members will be recognized for questions prior to those assigned to the subcommittee. Without objection, so ordered. This is this subcommittee's third event to review and assess the Department of Defense's role in the U.S. Foreign Military Sales Program. As I noted at our hearing last week with representatives of the defense industry, foreign military sales, or FMS, is one component of the partnership building tools the United States utilizes. It is a vital instrument of U.S. national security policy and is watched closely by our allies, partner nations, and adversaries alike. This subcommittee understands that FMS is a complex program. It is executed by many federal agencies and policy stakeholders. All are dedicated professionals who strive to further U.S. national security. They recognize that building critical relationships and military capacities of our foreign partners and allies strengthens American security. It also aids our vital defense industrial base and in many ways eases the task of equipping our forces with the best equipment. But as with many large and multifaceted programs, FMS also comes with an inherent set of bureaucratic challenges. Some observers think the process is needlessly delayed and hinders the ability to deliver military capabilities to our partners engaged in many of the same conflicts or confronting the same threats we are. In recent weeks, our subcommittee has learned through various avenues about lengthy policy reviews that occur regarding some FMS cases. For example, it's my understanding that FMS cases for fighter aircraft that began well over 2 years ago have been delayed due to opaque and bureaucratic deliberations at the National Security Council. This is very unfortunate, and I wholeheartedly agree with Chairman Thornberry's recent assessment that the NSC has become an organization making military operational decisions, building misinformation campaigns, and absorbing most national security functions from within the White House. I also strongly support the amendments filed by both Chairman Thornberry and Representative Jackie Walorski during floor consideration of the fiscal year 17 NDAA this week. And I'm glad that they were made in order so that we can vote to implement overdue accountability and congressional oversight to the processes and deliberations of the NSC. We have also heard of delays stemming from the need to ensure technology embedded in U.S. products is properly protected. It is important to note that as we seek to streamline this process, the foundational basis of the FMS program is to support and preserve the national security interests of the United States. Concerns have also been expressed about initial requirements or final design configurations which have been poorly developed. We have heard that the Defense Department does not always efficiently collaborate with industry in appropriately determining and developing end item configurations based on the defined requirements. We have been told the department also sometimes insists on undesirable contractual vehicles and upfront financial requirements that may dissuade allies from coming to the U.S. for their military equipment and support service needs. I also am concerned about the size and alignment of the department's acquisition workforce and how the workforce is trained in prioritizing of FMS cases. The goal of our FMS oversight activities has been to gain a better understanding of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and challenges associated with DoD's role in the FMS program, how this committee can help streamline the process without sacrificing technology security, and support the dedicated and hardworking people of our defense industrial base. It is essential that the program is executed effectively and efficiently and results in timelier acquisition and delivery of military capability where and when it is needed, both for the security of the United States and our reputation as an international partner. But before I introduce the witnesses, I turn to the Oversight Investigations Subcommittee Chairman, Ranking Member, for any opening remarks she wishes to make.
Madam Chair, thank you, and thank you to our witnesses who are here today. Last week, the subcommittee heard industry's perspective on the process for U.S. foreign military sales. We heard suggestions for improving the process, but we also heard about delays, including assertions that delays led to lost sales. I think it's important for us to dig deeper. How many sales have actually been lost? Let's get specific. Is the process slow because foreign countries are unwilling to sign agreements with the United States not to share technology with other countries who are not our allies? Last week's industry witnesses were unable to provide specific examples where foreign governments have walked away from an FMS sale because the process was too slow. The quality, prestige, and servicing agreements involved in purchasing U.S. weapon systems cannot be matched by foreign competitors. So I want to get a better sense of how much of an issue this really is. At the last hearing, industry also complained that the technology transfer review was slowing down the process. But I want to reiterate that we need reassurance that these weapons do not fall into the wrong hands. Obtaining these assurances is a necessary part of the process. Despite these potential challenges based on current sales this year, foreign military sales are robust. Let me repeat, they are robust. A recent Defense Security Cooperation Agency announcement indicated about $29 billion in FMS sales through the end of April, which is on track with last year, so the demand is still clearly there. Regardless, there are always improvements that can be made, and I look forward to hearing about several ongoing initiatives across the DoD to make the process more efficient. I also look forward to better understanding about benefits and potential pitfalls of the program. Foreign military sales support the U.S. defense manufacturing base and strengthen our international partnerships. Through FMS, our interoperability with other international partners increases, as does their capability to respond to shared global security challenges. One issue where we are failing to maximize the benefits from this program is in recouping the hundreds of billions of dollars of taxpayer money that has gone to research and development for these weapon systems. Historically, we used to recoup a portion of these investments when we sold weapons to foreign governments. However, due to a policy change, DoD now waives all research and development fees. As a result, we are leaving nearly $800 million, and I suggest even more, of taxpayer money on the table each and every year, and allowing industry and foreign governments to benefit at the American taxpayers' expense. Given the high demand for these sales, we need to do a better job of getting a return on our investment. In our oversight role of the DoD and its part in the FMS process, the subcommittee continues to learn more about whether the FMS process is suitably efficient, effective, and timely. Yet I'll reiterate what I said last week. We must not forget that FMS is an instrument of U.S. foreign policy. As we sell weapon systems and services to foreign countries, we must ensure they are used appropriately, responsibly, and are in our best interests. Although that may delay the process, it's a policy we must always keep in mind. With that, I yield back, Madam Chair.
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Spear. So I'm pleased to recognize our witnesses today, and I want to thank them for taking time to be with us. We have today Vice Admiral Joseph Rixey, Director of the Defense Security Cooperation Agency for the Department of Defense. Thank you for coming back. We have Ms. Claire Grady, Director of Defense Procurement and Acquisition Policy from the Office of the Under-Secretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, and Ms. Beth McCormick, Director of the Defense Technology Security Administration, also from the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. Thank you all for being with us here today, and so now we'll begin with your opening statements. So Vice Admiral Rixey, we'll begin with you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Hartzler, Ranking Member Spear, and members of the subcommittee. I am pleased to be here today to share with you my thoughts on the overall health and well-being of the foreign military sales process and the Department of Defense's role in the program from my vantage point as the Director of Defense Security Cooperation Agency. FMS is a longstanding foreign policy and national security program that supports partner and regional security, enhances military-to-military cooperation, enables interoperability, and develops and maintains international relationships. The system is performing very well, and the United States remains the provider of choice for our international partners with over 1,700 new FMS cases implemented in FY 2015 worth more than $47 billion. FMS is operated under the Title 22 authority, in which direction and guidance is delegated to DoD from both the President and from the Department of State. DoD manages the FMS lifecycle overseen by DSCA, conducts technology transfer reviews overseen by the Defense Technology Security Administration, and manages the defense acquisition and logistics systems, which are overseen by DoD Acquisition Technology and Logistics and the military departments. The FMS process is executed through a system designed to fulfill requirements of the Arms Export Control Act, ensuring three fundamental and critical validations occur before a capability can be offered: that the sale is of mutual benefit to the partner nation and the U.S. government, that the technology will be protected, and that the transfer is consistent with U.S. conventional arms transfer policies. Criticism of the alleged slow approval timelines is largely associated with a few high-profile cases. And this criticism is actually misplaced. These delays are the natural outcomes of the required validations rather than a negative reflection of the performance of the FMS system itself. The FMS system is burdened, but it's not broken. And we've made important strides not only within the Department of Defense, but across the interagency in mapping out and beginning to develop and implement important initiatives that target areas for improvement to keep the FMS system responsive to our partner needs and agile to support national security objectives. We have identified approximately 40 interagency initiatives to better enable the United States to remain the provider of choice for our foreign partners, providing them with the full spectrum of required capability to receive, maintain, and sustain the products they receive through the FMS program. Initiatives range from professionalizing of the security cooperation workforce, providing ways in which we can better understand and help define partner requirements earlier. And surely we are properly resourced for FMS contracting manpower, and establishing ways we can more effectively respond to the requirements, such as our ability to buy ahead of need with the Special Defense Acquisition Fund. And that's a broad overview. My written statement has greater detail that I'm happy to discuss in response to your questions. Distinguished committee members, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to sit before you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Grady.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Hartzler, Ranking Member Spear, and distinguished members of the subcommittee and committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you to discuss the role the defense acquisition community plays in supporting foreign military sales. In acquiring goods and services on behalf of FMS customers, we employ the same rigorous policies and procedures that we use to meet our own requirements. When an FMS customer seeks to acquire major weapon systems, whenever possible, the same Acquisition Program Management Office that oversees the DoD acquisition and sustainment of that system is also responsible for delivering the FMS requirements. In this way, the Department and the FMS customers enjoy the benefits of synergy, not only from the perspective of staffing, but also in realizing efficiencies in achieving economies of scale, which results in lower negotiated prices from industry. To increase the efficiency and effectiveness of the overall acquisition system, the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, Frank Kendall, has advanced a series of continuous improvement initiatives we refer to as Better Buying Power. One of the central elements of Better Buying Power is our focus on the people who comprise our acquisition workforce and ensure we provide the training and tools to enable them to secure the best possible value for our warfighters, the American taxpayer, and our FMS customers. The Department has invested significant resources with the support of Congress to ensure that our acquisition workforce is properly sized with the right skills, experience, and training to execute the responsibilities entrusted to us. Last year, DoD's talented contracting officers obligated over $274 billion on contract actions, of which about $26 billion were for foreign military sales. DoD training and certification programs for the defense acquisition workforce are considered to be the gold standard within the federal government. The professionalism and capability of our acquisition workforce is a significant contributing factor in our international partners' choice to acquire goods and services through the U.S. FMS program. Another pillar of Better Buying Power is to incentivize productivity and innovation in industry and the government. A key tenet of that is the need to employ appropriate contract types and to properly align incentives. There is no one preferred contract type. The contract type that is employed should reflect the balance of risk between the government and the contractor and provide the contractor with the greatest incentive to achieve the outcomes necessary to make the program successful. If the department were precluded from using the appropriate type contract in any particular environment, it would effectively constrain our ability to deliver best value to the FMS customer and eliminate opportunities to achieve efficiencies by combining U.S. and FMS contract requirements on the same contract. As detailed in the tables I included in my written statement, the department's contracting officers employ a variety of contract types that will best support the FMS customer's needs, with the predominant contract type being firm fixed price. Recognizing the importance of being responsive to customers' needs, we are continuing to work with Vice Admiral Rixey, DSCA, and the implementing agencies to shorten the times involved in the portion of the process that the acquisition community can influence. For example, as is the case with U.S. requirements, sole source foreign military sales contracts for military items require the contractor to submit certified cost or pricing data in accordance with the Truth in Negotiations Act. We are exploring opportunities to reduce procurement lead time and realize efficiencies by extrapolating from prior cost history to price future requirements and reduce the administrative cost for contractors to submit and certify proposals for FMS requirements. Another area where we are looking to improve is in the final pricing of undefinitized contract actions. The preferred practice is to finalize the terms and conditions and negotiate the price prior to award of a contract. However, due to urgent needs of FMS customers, it is often necessary to authorize the contractor to begin work prior to reaching final agreement on price and other terms. Although the statute exempts undefinitized contract actions awarded for FMS customers from restrictions and procedures otherwise required for UCAs, by policy, the department has mandated that these management procedures be employed whenever practicable, and if it is not possible to improve those if it's not possible to apply those management techniques, they're required to notify their acquisition chain of command, as well as my office. We also have instituted internal reporting procedures to provide management and attention and visibility on our use of UCAs and provide semi-annual reports to the Congress. In these reports, we identified a number of UCAs that have remained undefinitized for extended periods of time. Definitizing UCAs in a timely manner is important to both the government and industry and requires the mutual cooperation of both to achieve. We are committed to doing better in that area. Responsive to your hearing invitation letter, I've included in my written statement information about DoD's technology security and foreign disclosure process and the Defense Exportability Features Pilot Program. For acquisition, these initiatives are led by my colleague in the Office of the Undersecretary for Acquisition Technology and Logistics, the Director of International Cooperation. I thank you for the opportunity to address the acquisition perspective of this important element of the Security Cooperation Program, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Grady. Ms. McCormick?
Thank you, Chairman Hartzler, Ranking Member Spear, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the Department of Defense ongoing technology security and foreign disclosure process improvements. As part of the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, my agency, the Defense Technology Security Administration, collaborates with our sister agency, the Defense Technology Cooperation Agency, to build the capacities and capabilities of international allies and partners through the transfer of defense articles. Whether through the foreign military sales or direct commercial sales, providing the right equipment to match the security requirements of partners is a must. My agency also partners with several organizations in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. The Arms Transfer and Technology Release Senior Steering Group, which I co-chair with Keith Webster, Director of International Cooperation in the Office of the Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics, brings together all of the key DoD stakeholders and process owners, breaking down long-standing stovepipes and focusing attention on the considerable factors so we can get capability to our global partners effectively and efficiently. We recognize that in some complex export transactions, if we wait for a formal letter of request from an international partner, we will be behind the power curve in the technology security and foreign disclosure review process. As a result, for select high-demand or sensitive systems, we seek to develop anticipatory policies addressing several of the technology security and foreign disclosure reviews in advance of a request or export license submission. Also, we are able to avoid false impressions when the answer will be no, and in some cases address challenges early enough in order to get to a quick yes decision. Partnership between the U.S. government and U.S. defense industry is also imperative, and I would note that last week this committee had several presentations by those key industry associations. Last October, I had the privilege of co-hosting a U.S. DoD Industry Partnership Forum with Keith Webster. As co-chairs of the Arms Transfer and Technology Release Senior Steering Group, we thought it was high time to have a dialogue about ways industry and government can work together to facilitate defense exports. While we developed the initial concept for the event, the forum became a reality only through collaboration with the Aerospace Industries Association and the National Defense Industrial Association. This was a great opportunity to foster communication between the Department of Defense and our industry partners on how we can work together to ensure our industry remains competitive internationally. Industry is counting on increased exports of defense technology to new and emerging markets. We had industry and DoD panels addressing a variety of defense export-related topics with a healthy exchange of perspectives. We took stock of the many reforms undertaken, including the administration's Export Control Reform Initiative, improvement to the foreign military sales process, DoD participation in many international trade shows, and thinking about exportability capabilities to partners and allies from the start. Again, thank you for the opportunity to share our technology security and foreign disclosure-related process improvements with you today. I look forward to additional questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCormick. General Rixey, I'd like to start asking the questions of you. You said in your testimony that your written statement will provide more information on the different initiatives, over 40 initiatives that you shared with us 2 hearings ago, the list here of all these initiatives.
Yes.
And I was very much looking forward to you coming and sharing details about some of these.
Sure.
But in your oral testimony, you just mentioned a couple of them, and you said to look at the written testimony. We did not receive this till 8:30 last night. I was at that time reading Ms. Grady and Ms. McCormick's testimony, which didn't arrive 48 hours either before. Do you realize there's a requirement that the testimony be here 48 hours before? And how come you didn't meet that deadline?
Yes, ma'am, I do realize, and I apologize. I wanted to make sure that my chop went through the interagency properly, and I admit that it was my fault, and I should have had it to you sooner.
So there's no way that I've had a chance to read this, and nobody else on this committee has. So can you outline some of the things in the written testimony, some of the initiatives that you're doing to help speed up the process?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I'll talk about 3 or 4 specifically that I think are critically important. The first is we're working very closely with the services to ensure that we have adequate manpower to execute our programs. As I've shown earlier, it's a system of systems that has many artisans involved with ensuring that we get a good requirement from our customer, that we're able to process the case in a timely manner, that we're able to do the technology review, we can do the foreign policy review, and then finally, to ensure that we have enough artisans to get the acquisition process moving forward. We want to ensure that the services realize that it's in a critical mission area and that they support staffing of these key positions, as well as we're working with the services and the comptrollers to find a way to fund these personnel with non-appropriated funds to ensure that we can meet the demands of a very robust FMS system. So that's the very first initiative, is to ensure that we have adequate manpower to execute these programs.
Can I stop you just a second? Now, in Ms. Grady's testimony, you say you have oversight of over 30,000.
I'm sorry, to clarify, the 30,000 that I have.
You want to?
Good point, thank you, sorry. The 30,000 that I highlighted, I have personal oversight of is the contracting professionals. The acquisition workforce writ large is just over 150,000, about 153 to 156,000.
So how many of those, Admiral Rixey, are you speaking of that you're making sure you have adequate manpower of?
Well, we fund overall the whole system. I fund about 10,000, and I would say roughly about 7,000 of those. A majority of those are in the acquisition community. So,
do you feel like you need to hire more to meet the needs?
I do believe that we will if the demand continues. There are three items that our international partners tend to purchase. If they purchase an item that's from our program of record or something that we're already developing, I can leverage for the most part the program offices that exist for those type of equipment. For example, the F-18 Hornet. I would go to the F-18 program office and say, and they actually have a contingent that do international sales, and we can facilitate that. Sometimes our international partners want to buy an item from us, but they want to add capability that's unique to their country. Well, then I have to go to the same program office and ask them for engineers and technicians to help me understand how we're going to integrate these capabilities in. And that's usually supported very well. Where we run into some difficulties is when a country asks us for non-program of record type procurements. For example, a patrol boat that's not in our inventory. Then I have to go find, there is no program office, we have to establish a program office, and that sometimes is a challenge, finding those artisans, because we're always running up against manpower constraints or caps in manpower. The way we fund our personnel right now is through reimbursable accounts, which at this point count against their caps. We are working with the comptrollers to figure out how to pay direct site and establish these types of program offices and this type of support without counting against the services manpower. And that's one of the initiatives that we're working on, is to be able to both expand and contract with sales.
To have the flexibility.
Have the flexibility, yes, ma'am.
So how many people are you planning on hiring in the next 6 months?
In the next 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
I think we have a lot of work to do in terms of understanding anticipated demand, and I still have to go through the mechanisms of how to hire. So not many in the next 6 months. We'll be able to project over the life of these cases what we think we're going to need in terms of as contracts start to become required for case execution. In the 6 months, I don't have enough time right now to change the policies.
Okay, so the adequate workforce is one of the things that you're trying to get a hold of and
Yes.
figure out manning.
Yes.
Why don't you go ahead and give another example, then we'll go to questions of other.
So the next one I think is probably the most important, and it's within our control, is we need to certify and train our security cooperation workforce almost in the same manner that we did a couple decades back with the acquisition community. Right now, security cooperation, I would say, is basically an ad hoc operation. We do train our folks. We send them to school at Wright-Patterson called DISAM. I would say that that would probably be like a level 1 certification. We need to expand upon that. We need to make sure that the 800 plus security cooperation officers that I'm responsible for in the embassies down in these particular countries are fully trained. And in some of these countries, we may need a level of certification above an entry-level certification. So we need to professionalize the security cooperation workforce, from the security cooperation and also within the services, and we also need to reach out to the acquisition community, which I think you will explain, Claire will explain how we're training our acquisition professionals to be savvy in acquisition for foreign partners. And so this is what I think we need to embark on, and is very important.
I was going to go, but since you mentioned Ms. Grady, that is something in her testimony, which I very much enjoyed your testimony, that was getting right at the heart of the changes that you were making to try to address and expedite FMSs. So I very much appreciate that. But you mentioned that there is now a international acquisition billeting that you are doing to train people in this specific area. Can you expound on that and tell how many people, how many billets you have that deals just with foreign military sales?
Absolutely. And first of all, as part of our standard acquisition training, we apply the same processes to foreign military sales as we do to U.S. So one of the important elements of that training is addressing foreign military sales early in all of our acquisition training, so that when our program managers are embarking on a new program, they are considering the full spectrum of potential requirements, including partner or allied sales in the future when they're standing up programs. So we want people to have, acquisition professionals to have awareness of the full scope of the acquisition responsibilities they have, including the foreign military sales. In addition to what's included as part of the standard certification training for our functional communities, we also have subspecialties in international acquisition, where we've identified positions that are predominantly or have a need to have greater knowledge of the international acquisition. That as a subspecialty emerged in 2007 exclusively for program managers. It wasn't until 2014 that we looked and said it is much broader than just the program manager who needs awareness associated with that. We've put through about 7,500 students in training, and we have recently put a lot of emphasis on two foundational courses, Acquisition 120 and Acquisition 130. Acquisition 120 deals predominantly with the security cooperation enterprise and what the acquisition role is in that. Acquisition 130 focuses on technical rights and disclosure of technology, and we've had about 6,000 people take those courses just since they've stood up in 2014. So it's been an area of emphasis, and when we look at our acquisition workforce and our planning for the future, we look not just for the U.S. requirements, but the total capabilities that we need to deliver and make sure that we're working with the service acquisition executives to forecast their workforce needs for the full body of work we're going to ask them to perform.
It sounds like certainly makes a lot of sense to me that you would train people and give them the specialty background that they need to deal with that. Okay, Ranking Member Spear.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again to the witnesses for your testimony. Vice Admiral Rixey, when you refer to non-program of record cases, you're talking about designer products, are you not, for specific countries?
Yes, ma'am, they will be unique.
So, I mean, I think it's really important for us to appreciate that when a country comes to us and says, we don't want something off the shelf, we want you to build us something special, that's a designer product. That is a one-of-a-kind, and frankly, they should pay for that, and they should pay, in my view, the R&D for that as well, because we are building them something unique. Now, let's get to the crux of this. How many cases do you have in any given year?
Well,
How
in
many
FY15,
sales?
we had 1,774
Okay, 1,774 sales that actually went through the process.
that were implemented, cases that were implemented.
And how many of those were for weapons?
I would say roughly, we broke that out, and the rough order of magnitude is about 75% goes to end items and 25% to things like training and services.
So 75% of all of those were for weapons systems.
yeah.
If you were to chart that year to year, how would that compare?
I'll have to take that for the record, but if I were to guess, that would be consistent. But
Do you expect sales to increase?
I expect sales to be steady this year to match what we did in 16 or 15.
Okay. There's been a lot of talk in this committee about lost sales. And the witnesses that testified last week, I specifically asked them, give me some examples, and they were hard-pressed to do it. Could you tell us, how many sales have we lost because of the slowness of the process?
I cannot. I'd have to take that back for the record as well. There has been, industry has told me that they've lost sales, but I don't have any proof, and so I'll have to go back and do more research on that. I know that the fact that we do get delayed in certain items, the international partners do convey to me that they will look elsewhere for products, but I'll have to take that question back for the record to get you an exact answer.
But when all is said and done, if they want an F-16, they're probably not going to go somewhere else to get it.
Well, they can. They can go to the French. They can go for Mirage. They can go to Saab, and occasionally they do. But that's not the reason. They don't tell me the reasons. It could be for their competitive advantage within their country, and so they can go to other places. There are other opportunities to buy a Generation 4, Generation 4.5 fighters from other countries.
But if they're allies of ours, is that a bad thing?
Not necessarily. If it's a NATO-compliant solution, it's interoperable. That's a capability. And again, the business of DSEA is to provide capability. And if they find that through, like I said, a NATO-compliant solution, that is a capability. What we strive for in foreign military sales is building our partnership capacity and interoperability. That is what our mission statement is for. And the reason we encourage foreign military sales is that we're involved with the contracting. We can design the contract itself and the specifications and to ensure maximum interoperability. That is an extension of our warfighting capability if they are interoperable. And
So where does the slowness start to be seen? Where is the log jam?
man, we've actually tried to look at that in terms of, I built a Gantt chart that shows from, again, when the customer makes a requirement down through all the different lanes that we have to go through, where we have to discuss a mutual benefit. Is it a technology transfer issue? Is it a foreign policy concern? And is it available in our acquisition community? We're seeing holdups throughout various places, whether it's foreign policy review or going from once we have approval to contract award. It's everywhere, and it is a complex system of systems. I'd like to think that the front end of it, where we have that deliberate conversation, goes at a pace that is required to make sure that we have the deliberative conversation.
Well, in a private conversation that I had with you yesterday, you seemed to indicate to me that the delays start to occur in the foreign policy area when the purchaser is unwilling to sign the agreements relative to retaining the technology and not sharing it with third parties that are not our friends.
I would argue that of the 1,774 cases that we had go through the system, the ones that gained a lot of attention are those very few high-profile cases that are hung up in policy review. And for the most part, most of what we have goes through the system relatively quickly. Some of these major defense articles that get these headlines, the few happen to have huge production lines and have huge workforces depend on the sales of these end items. But when I look at the system as a whole, writ large, I think fundamentally we get to the system quickly. I am worried and concerned about, with $47 billion of sales this year and matching next year, the sheer number of contracts going through our acquisition community could cause the major delay. And I think if you ask industry, where they focus their concerns is getting to contract award once we've had approval. And we're working very hard on these things. And I think Claire will talk about some of the initiatives that are in place. The foreign policy issue that I see really are on high-profile cases, and really not that many when you look at the 1,774 cases that we pushed through. So, and why are they hung up? Well, things tend to get hung up when some of the countries don't sign security agreements with us. So when we come to technology transfer and technology review, we pause on whether or not we're going to provide that capability from a technology transfer perspective.
Okay, on the issue of research and development, historically, we were reimbursed for the research and development that we provided for all these complicated weapon systems. You had indicated to me that if we were to receive the R&D licensing fee, so to speak, we would be talking about, I think the figure you said was over $800 billion a year.
Yes.
So when did we stop receiving those funds? What year was it?
I don't know the exact date. I was understanding it was in the 90s. I know that when it comes to waiving non-recurring costs, I execute that in accordance with the Arms Export Control Act. That authority has been delegated from the President down to the Secretary of Defense and down to me.
Well, at one point, as I understand it, there was an amendment to just get rid of the R&D reimbursement, and Congress said no, that what we'll give you instead is a waiver. But as I understand it from you, you have waived every single request.
Almost every single. There's been one or two exceptions, but for the most part, yes. And the criteria that we use is, so in the last 3.5 years, we waived for NATO standards. So a NATO country, Australia, New Zealand, and a few others, we waived. 38% of the waives associated with that. The other two reasons that we're authorized to waive is there's a likely loss of a sale, or if there's economies of scale to be gained by selling, for example, more jets on a line and incorporating that into our contract, our unit costs come significantly down, then we won't.
But Vice Admiral, those three potential reasons to do it basically cover the waterfront, right? You could
Yes, they do.
basically make that argument for everything, and that's what you've done. So
Yes,
we
ma'am.
have received, the taxpayers have received zero, basically zero back for all the R&D that we invest in these various weapon systems. Now, the F-35, as I understand it, can only be purchased through FMS. Is that correct?
That is not correct. We have FMS customers as well
No,
of the F-35.
from direct military sales? I thought.
Only through FMS. I'm sorry. I was confused with it's a cooperative program, and we have FMS customers. You are absolutely correct.
So in that kind of situation, they're not buying it from anyone else. They
That's correct.
want that particular weapon. And why wouldn't we recoup the R&D that we have invested in that particular weapon system?
Well, again, I applied the logic of likely loss of.
Well, but you're not going to lose it because they're not going to get it through direct military sales, and they specifically want that airplane and not someone else's airplane.
Not in all cases. They can't. They have alternatives. There are other Generation 4, 4.5 fighters that they can go to if they find it too costly. And so, again, I applied the waiver criteria that's been provided.
Okay, I'm just going to say for the record, Madam Chair, we're talking about taxpayer money. And historically, the R&D was recouped. It has morphed into a situation where it's waived unilaterally and ubiquitously. And the result is the taxpayer is just fronting this R&D money without any benefit. And we wouldn't expect that from a license that a university was providing to a pharmaceutical company. They get recoupment. And I think the federal taxpayer should get recoupment as well. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Admiral, you mentioned patrol boats, and if just as an example, a country like Australia, if they wanted to buy a patrol boat from a U.S. company, would they have to go through the foreign military sales
No, sir. They could go direct commercial.
because they're a NATO ally?
I think when we look at the technology, we would do an evaluation based on technology, but a patrol craft, if it didn't have any sensitive technologies that was concerned for our technology release, they could go direct commercial sale.
Okay, so it's really it's not the vessel, it's the weapon systems and the technology that's on the vessel that where foreign military sales comes in.
There's two reasons. If we designate it, and Ms. McCormick can talk about it, if it's designated as FMS only, then it has to go through the FMS system. There are some countries that don't have mature enough procurement officials to buy anything, and they come to us to purchase it for them.
Okay, well that answers one question. There's smaller countries who don't have the ability to do this, to negotiate the contracts on themselves is one of the reasons they would come through foreign military sales.
Yes, sir.
But a country like Australia, who is a friend, if they want to buy a patrol craft, they can just negotiate directly with U.S. manufacturers, and if there are any questions about the technology or the weapon systems that might be on that patrol craft, then they would get either a waiver from foreign military sales or...
Well, we would what we would do is we would call it a hybrid. They could buy 95% of it via direct commercial sale, and then maybe, for example, if it's a system that is so classified for even Australia, we would deem that FMS, and that piece would be FMS, and then it would be provided to the vendor.
Okay, so of the thousands of contracts that you have, if you broke them down by the dollar volume, is it 10% of the contracts that would make up 90% of the dollar volume? Do we have are there several supersized contracts that make up the vast majority of the volume?
There are some supersized cases that make up the majority of the volume. And I can, if you want to, in a closed session, I could walk you through but the specific countries and those contracts themselves.
Well, certainly to me, if we can simplify the process, I think that would be better for everybody. It'd be better for the three of you, and it would be better for the industry that's trying to sell the weapons, and it would be better for the consumer as well. And so some of the stuff that's not sensitive, getting it out of the backlog sooner rather than later, I think probably helps everybody. But for all of you, and I hope you'll be specific with this. if there are any federal acquisition regulations or statutory policy requirements that could be altered or eliminated, what would make DoD's portion of the FMS program more efficient or effective? And just pick one thing, if you would. What's the one thing you would do if you could, if you had control that would make the system better?
Well, I would support DASD Security Cooperation's initiative consolidating some of these Title X authorities down to to be a little bit more flexible than they are. And so we do also run Title X authorities through the FMS system, and they come with some restrictions like time, region, and there's about 20 authorities. So anything we can do to streamline those Title X authorities, I think would help alleviate a lot of the strain on our contracting commands because of the restrictions associated with them, and that's to support that initiative.
From an acquisition and procurement perspective, we largely follow the identical regulations for both foreign military sales and U.S. Sales. There's maybe less than 5 pages of unique requirements associated with foreign military sales in our procurement and acquisition regulations. Most recently, though, last year in the National Defense Authorization Act, we got specific guidance or authority from the Hill relative to treatment of offset costs, and that has been one of the areas that has historically slowed us down significantly from foreign military sales. We are in the process of implementing that from a regulation perspective, and that should expedite the contracting process. It is one of the unique aspects of a foreign military sale that would not have been, that is not applicable to U.S., which, because it is foreign, it is different, and therefore it takes some time or added time to the process. The treatment of indirect offset costs that we got the authorization for last year will help us in terms of speeding up our timeline.
All right, I'm down to 10 seconds, so hurry. Please.
Congressman, I don't really have any specifics because I think the role in my process is one that has to be a fairly deliberate one, and so it takes some time to make the decisions that we need to make. But I would echo Admiral Rixey's comments that some of the authorities that we have under Title X should be looked at and streamlined.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Graham.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you all for being here today. Admiral, following up on Congressman Scott's question, so there are FMS contracts and there are commercial contracts. Do we keep track of those that are getting FMS contracts, what they're doing commercially as well?
Yes, and that's the State Department program. So we handle FMS, and then the license requirements, they go through state, and state manages and tracks direct commercial sales.
Is there somewhere where you can go where you can see what foreign governments have, what foreign governments have in terms of commercial contracts as well?
Well, I would defer that to state, but we track obviously the FMS cases that come through DSC.
Do they? So they do have a tracking system where they keep track of
Yeah,
them?
Beth.
Maybe I could
Okay.
help with the question, since I get it, my agency actually is in a situation that we get the licenses referred to us by the Department of State. So in this particular case, under the Title 22 authorities of the State Department, the Directorate of Defense Trade Controls actually receives license authorizations from our industry directly to sell basically some of the same products through the direct commercial sale process. And that State Department Bureau of Political Military Affairs also oversees the foreign military sales process. So all of defense trade is under their authorities and under the Title 22. So, but my agency actually gets to review those direct commercial sale licenses. So we provide that technology security input into the Department of State on those matters as well.
And how is a decision made if, I'm assuming we have countries that have both commercial and FMS contracts, how is the decision made whether it is required FMS or whether it can be done commercially?
I'll go ahead and take that one again. The decision basically is really a choice by the recipient country unless we have made a decision between the Department of Defense and the Department of State that a particular item must go through the foreign military sales process. And that decision is normally made, what we were just answering Congressman Scott's question, it's normally because that technology is so sensitive that we want to put in place the various agreements between ourselves and the other government for the protection of that technology. Otherwise, it's really driven by the international partner, the international customer's decision.
Will the gentlelady yield?
Absolutely.
Isn't it also, the difference is with direct military sales, you don't have the support provided in terms of maintenance? isn't that the distinction between the two?
It's not provided. It's that we aren't ensuring that is provided. So if the partner nation is like Australia, who wants to go direct commercial sale, they're strong enough and capable enough that they're going to build in a logistics support plan, and they have the absorption capability. So that's dependent upon the nation that's procuring. So going direct commercial sale doesn't mean they're not going to get the logistics support or will they be able to absorb it. When they go foreign military sales, we ensure full spectrum capability, so we will deliver the end product, 2 years of initial support. We will encourage them to have a follow-on technical support case so that it is being supported properly, and we ensure that they can absorb it through our conversations with the COCOMs and our country teams. So the difference between a foreign military sale and a direct commercial sale is we feel it's necessary, again, as the mission of Defense Security Cooperation, to deliver full spectrum capability. And so we have to have very candid conversations, deliberate conversations, which also slow down the process to assure that they get the product, they have the support, and they can absorb it. DCS is between the country and the contractor. We have no idea about the configuration. We have no idea about supportability. The times that we recommend DCS is when the technology is mature and the procuring officials are mature. Anytime you deviate from that, they're setting themselves up for a non-supportable system.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding.
Of course, thank you. In the two processes, is there an advantage in terms of timing or challenges that the countries face to choose one over the other than what Congresswoman Spear just pointed out, that one has more of a support system attached to it than the other?
Well, I will tell you what I'm told is the advantage of going direct commercial sales. First of all, they can go direct to the international, or they can go direct to the vendor. In their minds, they think they're saving on the 3.5% administrative fee that we charge to manage these cases. Mm-hmm. However, they're still going to go through the technology review. They're not going to skip that. There's this thought out there that they won't have to go through the technology review process. They do. Mm-hmm. But in terms of going direct to the vendor, they can negotiate their fee, they can negotiate the contract. An FMS case, when they come to us, we go through our entire processes to get there. And I think they're necessary processes. And because sometimes some of these countries that don't have mature contracting offices get themselves into bad contracting vehicles, and so we are providing a service, and we are charging for a service. We also make sure in our terms and conditions of a foreign military sale that they can't do third-party transfers and that they're subject to our end-use monitoring processes. So they think that when they go direct, they're skipping this. They're not. And they're also putting themselves at risk of dealing with our with our industry. Now, again, when they have very mature contracting offices, that's not a problem.
Mm-hmm. Would we sell F-35s to international?
Correct.
Obviously, would that be considered something that goes through FMS every time?
That does.
Okay.
And I would highly recommend a major end item, especially that's involved with still completing its phases of development, to go foreign military sales. It's a huge risk if they do otherwise.
Okay, thank you. I yield back, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. Madam Badillo.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Admiral Rixey, I think many of us see the FMS process as integral to our Asia-Pacific rebalance strategy in terms of reassuring allies and partners as well as building capacity in that region. Now, in recent years, we have made progress with regard to South Korea, and I'm hopeful that efforts will continue to streamline sales to our partners in the South China Sea. You touched very briefly on this in your testimony, but to what extent is DSCA, in coordination with the Department of State, working to prioritize FMS, particularly related to maritime capabilities for countries in the Asia-Pacific region?
Well, yes, ma'am. We work very closely with our combatant commanders, with OSD policy, and with state to ensure that we understand our priorities writ large. Well, I think once you understand that FMS, I told you, is a burden process, we have to have some mechanism for prioritizing this finite workforce.
Mm-hmm.
We actually reorganized at DSCA along regional lines. And so I now have an integrated regional team lead at DSCA that has a relationship with the combatant command in a specific code that does security cooperation, has a relationship with OSD policy to ensure that we are, in fact, executing those priorities. And those folks in the Pacific are very much tied into these initiatives that you're talking about.
Very good. Now, from the DSCA perspective, what tools can Congress provide to enhance and facilitate internal as well as external processes with regards to the South China Sea FMS? Is there anything that...
I can't think of anything on hand, but let me take that back for the record. I'll get you a response.
Okay, and though this hearing isn't an evaluation of the excess defense articles or foreign military financing programs, they do fall under a similar purview, and I welcome any additional relevant comments that you may have.
Yes, ma'am. I will follow up, take that for the record, and provide that for you.
Very
We
good.
are executing those programs as diligently as possible. So,
Well, I'm pleased to hear that.
yes, ma'am.
And I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Vice Admiral Rixey, I've had a chance to look just briefly at your testimony as others have been talking here. You said, I will not address each of the initiatives that you outlined, but you do cover a few of them. I was wondering if you and your office could take each one of these and write a summary of what you're doing in each of these initiative areas and for us. That would be very helpful.
Yes, ma'am. We will forward you we actually have built PowerPoint quad charts that talk about those specifically, and I have them, and I will provide those to you.
Great. Well, we appreciate your efforts there. Ms. Grady, last week at our hearing with the industry, they indicated and were talking about how when a project comes through, it is mixed together with a domestic sale project at the same time, and sometimes might be put on the back burner until the domestic program goes through first. And I was just wondering, so how are acquisition programs prioritized within the DoD for interagency acquisition programs and the FMS case acquisition programs?
Certainly. We look collectively at our total requirements, both U.S. and foreign allies and coalition partners. And when I say we, that it begins at the highest levels. We have warfighter senior integration groups where we look at emerging needs from COCOMs and from the joint staff working in conjunction with acquisition technology and logistics, Admiral Rixey staff on DSCA, DTSA, as well as all the implementing agencies to ensure we have visibility on the highest priority needs across the department. Those obviously, particularly where you impact warfighter, are going to get the highest priority across the department from an acquisition perspective. When you come to more routine recapitalization, that is balanced as part of the total workload of a particular implementing agency. And when we do forecast our requirements, we forecast both what we need for U.S. and what we need for FMS, and make sure that we track and get the management attention across the board, including looking at acquisition milestones to make sure we continue to progress. Wherever possible, we combine U.S. and foreign military requirements. That's where we find the greatest efficiencies if we can put everything on one contract. Budget cycles or needs don't always align that way, in which case then we would enter into a separate procurement action associated with that. But again, using the same program office to the greatest extent possible, so you have the sustaining engineering benefits as well as production efficiencies as well as management of the vendor's efforts. So we look at it as a collective workload management perspective, and there, in some cases, a U.S. requirement will be a higher priority. In some cases, an FMS requirement will be a higher priority. That is coming from the customers, and we make sure that is reflected in how we execute the workload.
Great, thank you. Ms. McCormick, so to put this question in context, industry expressed frustration to the subcommittee last week in their testimony that they would, kind of in generalities, say show up to DOD with, say, a certain rock, and DOD would in turn tell them to bring us a different rock without providing much detail on why the first rock wasn't sufficient. And it related to understanding technology exportability and configuration management of end items. So therefore, what processes do you use to collaborate with the defense industry to provide predictability and policy guidance about which U.S. defense technologies are exportable and which are not?
Well, thank you, Chairwoman. That's interesting that they say that because actually they bring me a lot of rocks and I help to shape the rocks that they bring us usually. I do it really through a couple of different ways. The first thing is have a very open door policy with industry where I actually encourage industry to come in and talk to us actually even before they submit their export licenses. We also do deep dive sessions. In fact, Admiral Rixey and I just did one a couple of weeks ago with one of the major defense companies where we spent over 3 hours talking about all of their international projects. In fact, I've really encouraged companies now, particularly as companies are increasing the amount or looking to increase their international sales, and particularly doing sales in countries perhaps where we don't have a lot of experience, don't have a lot of track record, to come in and really share with us, their plans. And that gives us a great opportunity, I believe, to talk about sort of what is the art of the possible and to give them a clear sense of it. The final area I think that's been very helpful in this regard to clarify sort of what's in the art of the possible has been the significant changes that we've made as part of the administration's export control reform initiative, where we've gone through a comprehensive review of our export control regulations, both the Commerce Department's and the Department of State. My agencies played a very key role in the technical review of those regulations and actually determining what type of technology we believe should stay on the jurisdiction of the Department of State. And we've moved a variety of items, many items actually, over from the Department of State over to the Department of Commerce, including items, to be honest with you, that are military items. And now they're over on the Commerce's jurisdiction, and they're allowed to go to our friends and allies more easily, in fact, in a very, oftentimes without any additional authorization by the United States government. So I think those bright line exercises we've done as part of export control, where we've published those regulations and industries had a chance to comment on them, I think through all those vehicles they have a very good opportunity to know exactly where the sensitive technologies are and what type of technology they would be able to sell internationally.
Okay, good. Do you believe that the department is sufficiently staffed with the necessary skills to adequately perform in-use monitoring and enhanced in-use monitoring activities for those U.S. technologies that are exported to foreign customers?
I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave the staffing answer to Admiral Rixey, but I'll give you my piece of the puzzle. What my agency is very much involved in is working with Admiral Rixey as well as the Department of State to determine what types of technology, first off, as we've talked previously, need to go through that FMS process, and which technology needs to have certain levels of either end-use monitoring or enhanced end-use monitoring. And so a lot of that is driven by that technology level. So my staff and I are very involved in actually setting the determination of the frequency with which that end-use monitoring needs to be done. But in terms of the staffing level, I'll leave that to Admiral Rixey, since it's usually the workforce that he actually helps to fund that do that work.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Well, first of all, staffing concerns with end-use monitoring is the same as staffing concerns with contracting and everything else. So as the foreign military sales increase, we will need to staff to meet that demand. I am responsible for the Golden Century program. That is for foreign military sale. The state is responsible for Blue Lantern. Under the Golden Century program, we have our staff that's are in the embassies in each country. So we're working very closely with the services to identify those needs, also how they're allocated, working with the Joint Staff and how those folks are allocated. Again, we're going to have to look at staffing mechanisms that don't count against manpower counts. And then I also have a team at DSEA that's responsible for assessing. We do assessment visits with each country to determine, are they managing their end-use monitoring programs carefully. With that assessment, we rate them, and satisfactory, they can continue. We have rated some unsatisfactory when they're not meeting the requirements associated with that. And that is the team that I have that do those assessments and do those courtesy visits back at DSEA. We're staffed for that, but I will be concerned with the folks that we have in the embassies in terms of numbers if these sales continue to rise.
Very good. Ms. Grady, in your testimony, you talk a little bit about the different types of contracts, and that was also brought up last week with industry. And you make a case there for enabling the fixed price incentive to continue, and you say that you require a lot of customers of FMS to participate in this at times. Let's see. To simply put, sufficient funding needs to be in place to ensure that the FMS customer pays the final bill, no more, no less. This is alluding to the 3.5% fee, that is.
Actually, ma'am, that was in reference to a point that industry had raised last week about
Right.
the length of time that we need to hold on to excess funds before we can close out the contract. So that was specifically to contract type, not to the fee that is payable for the FMS process.
Yeah, right. We're talking about the same thing. I'm
Okay,
getting
good.
around to my question here, because they did raise that concern that sometimes it could be 7 to 10 years that the money is held up by the country until the contract is completely filled. So I just wondered, has there been examples of a country not having enough money to pay their final bill, and when did that happen?
I'm not aware of a specific example. We can go back and look associated with that. We monitor throughout the contract performance to ensure that there are adequate funds in the case to pay all the costs associated with it. When we talk about cases versus contracts, cases are usually a compilation of support that we're providing to a particular country, and it's usually typically more than just one specific contract. So it's the broader package of support that we are delivering to that foreign government. So we monitor both the estimate up front of what we think it will cost to complete the contract, and then we monitor contract performance throughout the entire life of the contract to ensure that we have adequate funds. In the event the funds are different than what we anticipated, we'd either notify the customer that we are, through DSAA, that we have excess funds, or notify them that we need to potentially amend the case to add additional funding associated with that. We track that throughout the process. That's part of the case management function, and we want to be as transparent and as timely as possible in terms of notifying them where we are relative to the expenditure of their money.
Would you be supportive of allowing the country to choose which type of contract that they enter into?
So what's somewhat unique about the FMS process is the letter of offer and agreement is a contract between the country and DSCA. The contract that we're entering into itself is actually between the U.S. government and U.S. industry. So while we're doing that on behalf of the FMS customer, they are not actually a party to the legal contract that we enter into. What we look at, and we apply the same rigor and discipline associated with selection of contract type for our FMS customers as we do for our U.S. customers. In a mature production environment, it would be fairly typical to see a firm fixed price contract type. Where we have seen uses of fixed price incentive has been instances where when we look at what we negotiated versus what the actual costs incurred were, and there was a significant variation. And when I say significant variation, we define that back in 2008 in our acquisition regulations as greater than 4%. So basically, there is some factor that is driving uncertainty into the cost of performance that we didn't account for when we negotiated with industry. Using a fixed price incentive contract allows for sharing between either the overrun or underrun associated with those excess or surplus funds to be shared between the customer, ultimately the customer and industry. So our preference is to use firm fixed price, but only if we have cost certainty that allows us to fairly price those contracts.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. I just have a couple more here for Ms. McCormick. Can you tell me anything about what internal benchmarks DTSA has in place to guide decision timelines, and how are DITSA and DSCA communicating decision timelines to our country's partners to ensure that they are making the best decisions in their national security interest and not seeking goods services from alternative sources such as China or Russia?
Thank you for that question. So the first one is I alluded in I mentioned in my opening statement, and it's also in my written statement about the Arms Transfer and Technology Release Senior Steering Group that we use. I think this is a very good forum that we use really as a benchmark, because that is a forum where we get the DoD stakeholders together and we identify priority release decisions that we're working across the different processes. I also every week get together with my staff, and I'm constantly looking at the timelines associated with our review of export licenses. Obviously, we do provide the technical input, particularly to the Department of State, on those direct commercial sale munitions licenses. And we don't have a statutory timeline in that case, but I try to move very quickly, trying to do that in sort of the 60-day time frame. On the dual use side, with the commerce license, we actually have statutory requirements that we have to meet. Those licenses have to review in a 30-day period. And so I think through the last couple of years, the processes that we've used to really track this are really trying to, again, be anticipatory with these release decisions, and as I indicated in my testimony, to actually do that in release of basically before a country actually asks for that capability. Admiral Rixey and I also work very closely together, where the whole issue of defense trade is a constant discussion point that we have with international partners. We both work for Undersecretary Christine Wormuth and the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, and she has many bilateral dialogues with countries. And I can tell you that the defense trade portion, including foreign military sales, is always a key part of those dialogues. And so I think that keeps our feet to the fire, where we're working very closely with those international partners, and they realize that the capability, we want to provide that capability to them, and we certainly want to do it in a timely manner and be a provider of choice.
Very good. So given the constraints on the U.S. budgets and foreign military sales are increasingly important to ensuring that the U.S. defense companies are able to remain competitive and provide for a more robust industrial base. So how are DITSA and DISCA communicating with industry to ensure that they have visibility on expected timelines in order to plan and ensure that they meet critical FMS needs, and what can we be doing better here?
Well, ma'am, first of all, we have a very robust industry engagement, and I meet with them regularly, unilaterally or bilaterally, and sometimes I meet with Ms. McCormick. She joins me, and we have discussions with our industry partners. I have an entire team called my weapons group that's really an ombudsman to our industry partners to have as much dialogue as they're willing to have on these particular cases. In addition to that, I sit with Mr. Kendall, and when he meets with the significant primes of industry to discuss foreign military sales. So we have what I consider an extraordinarily robust industry engagement across all three fronts to make sure that we're managing their expectations.
Great. All right. Looks like Ms. Spear had to leave, so I think we're done with the questions from our end, but I wanted to give each one of you an opportunity to make any closing statements or anything else you would like to share on this topic that you haven't had a chance to cover yet. So, Vice Admiral? Maybe?
Well, I'd like to close by saying, first of all, thanks for this opportunity. I do want to emphasize that we are defending the foreign military sales system. We think it's, the Arms Export Control Act and all that it entails is critically important to ensure that it's, as a foreign policy tool, we are doing it the right way. An FMS case, as opposed to direct commercial sale case, really establishes a mill-to-mill relationship for 25 to 40 years. It is a very effective foreign policy tool for building that relationship, for interoperability, for building out our capacity. And so, anyway, ma'am, thanks for the opportunity to speak today.
You bet. Thank you. Grady?
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity, and I think I've emphasized this repeatedly, but also just wanted to make one more reiteration. One of the strengths of the acquisition system and our ability to support the foreign military sales agilely when you have potentially large swings in customer requirements and don't always have the ability to anticipate as well as we would like what those requirements are, keeping the processes as consistent as possible and providing the full range of actual acquisition tools we have available are the best way we can support our foreign military sale customers.
Great. Thank you.
And I appreciated the opportunity to join this panel today. I was sort of a late ad, I believe, last week, but I was very pleased to be asked because obviously it's very important. We do want to share advanced technology with international partners, but we also have to strike that balance to make sure that that technology is going to be used in the manner in which it should be used and for which we've authorized it. So I hope you've gotten the impression this morning we have a great collaboration within the Department of Defense to work these issues, and we also have a very strong partnership with industry as well. So thank you.
You bet. Well, thank you for all that you're doing for our country. This is a very important process, not only for our national security, but for our allies as well. And it's not an easy process. So appreciate all of your efforts. Thank you for being here today. This hearing is now done.